All right, so next up, we want to talk about the Spanish-American War. In 1898, America goes to war with Spain, and we need to understand why. So, to start us out, I have a really corny song, but it's so good. So, I am going to actually play you the corny song, and don't worry, it'll be on the soundtrack for American history. You know, I make that cute little soundtrack for y'all. So listen to it because I do think it does a nice little overview, actually, of what what kind of leads up to this war. Okay, hold on, here it comes, guys. So this war, 113-day war, known as the Splendid Little War, and here we go, best song ever.
Let's take some stuff. Turn of the century. America's foreign diplomacy turned its gay side where they saw opportunities abound. Spain ruled Cuba, one of our closest of neighbors, for hundreds of years. But a Cuban rebellion Spain feared. This unrest concerned us, we had Cuban investments, which earned us many millions of dollars. So for war, some Americans hollered. Telling war fever were many American newspapers with bias, sensationalism, and the untruths of yellow journalism. South of our borders, possibilities for us. Cuba, Puerto Rico, in the Caribbean, and in the Pacific, the Philippines and Guam. In 1898, the United States and the battleship made to the shores of Havana to protect all interests American. It sunk in an explosion that was most likely an accident, but the papers claim the main was done in by an enemy called Spain. South of our borders, possibilities for us. Cuba, Puerto Rico, in the Caribbean, and in the Pacific, the Philippines and Guam. Remember the main newspapers vehemently exclaimed, and Americans demanded blood, so the Spanish-American War was begun.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, U.S. involvement in Latin America and Asia increased greatly as a result of the war, and continues today. Can you say imperialism?
South of our borders, possibilities for us. Cuba, Puerto Rico, in the Caribbean, and in the Pacific, the Philippines and Guam. Remember the Maine.
Holy cow, that was so good. I just hope you appreciated that as much as I did. Okay, so what's up with this war? So the number one question I get from kids is, why are we going to war with Spain if stuff's going on in Cuba? And I hope you understand what's going on there. Um, so the Spanish had imperialized, obviously. We learned about the Spanish coming to even America and to Latin America. So they had imperialized, colonized and imperialized, and they had a lot of control on a lot of different territories. And so when we talk about going to war, and especially in the song where they talk about Puerto Rico, Guam, Cuba, the Philippines, because to the victor goes the spoils. So we will defeat the Spanish, and because of that, their territories become our territories, of course, for a price, of course. So let's take a look at what's going on here. We hear about these atrocities, especially from General Weyler, who was put into power in Cuba. And we see these stories, we see these pictures, horrifying, of these concentration camps, these reconcentration policies of how they were treating the Cubans. And the Cubans, there were definitely some insurrectos in Cuba that wanted Cuba to be, in control of the Cubans. And so they were pushing back and they were rebelling. And the Spanish Weyler, General Weyler, this is how they dealt with the Cubans, is by putting them into these camps. And so we see 20,000 Cubans died during this time period. Now, Weyler is going to be known as a butcher, okay? And he is brutal. And the Spanish actually end up dismissing him, okay? There's a very famous letter. It's known as the De Lome letter. And the Spanish ambassador to the United States essentially calls out McKinley. He says he's weak and a bitter for admiration of the crowd. All right. Besides being a would-be politician who tries to leave a door open behind himself while keeping on good terms with the jingos of his party. So he essentially says that he has no backbone. We will see that this does not go well, does not go over well, I should say, with the American public, to know that our leader is being called out by an ambassador to the United States. Ironically, though, Teddy Roosevelt will also kind of call out McKinley as well. And he even says he has a backbone of a chocolate eclair, but it comes off better when Teddy says it, I guess. Okay, yellow journalism is so important. We've got Pulitzer, there you go, Joseph Pulitzer, and William Randolph Hearst, okay? Both of these guys are, you know, titans of the newspaper. They are the ones that are making a lot of money, that are putting this together, and they are in hot competition to sell more newspapers than the other guy. And they definitely play a huge contributing factor in this war. In fact, William Randolph Hearst says to reporter and artist Frederic Remington, hey, you furnish the pictures and I'll furnish the war. And it is Frederic Remington who will furnish some pictures that will incite emotion amongst Americans, like this one right here. So this is a very famous drawing, and it says Spaniards search women on American steamers. And if you look really closely, you have these Spaniards with their nice little mustaches, and you have a woman, an American woman, it appears on an American steamer, who appears to be naked. Hello, scandal. Okay, you're searching our women and they're naked. Like, what? Okay, so the American public's gonna just like freak out about this. And this is not the only example. There are several examples that you can look up, but this is probably the most jaw-dropping one. Okay, let's look at my computer. Let's look at yellow journalism and what is known as jingoism. Okay, the Yellow Kid is essentially, it's the name of the lead American comic strip character that starts out in 1895 to 1898. During this conflict, we see Joseph Pulitzer puts it in his New York World. William Randolph Hearst also puts this character, and it's horribly racist, okay? But nonetheless, yellow journalism is a big part of this war and a part of selling newspapers at the time. So what is it? Because you must know it, kids. You got to know this. All right, yellow journalism, the characteristics of this is, okay, you have to have prominent headlines that scream with excitement, often about, you know, sometimes unimportant events, right? But you're comparing them and you're grabbing people's attention. Lavish use of pictures, sometimes without significance or emotionally charged pictures. Fake interviews and stories were definitely part of it. A Sunday supplement was key, okay? And color comics, kind of like what you just saw with the Yellow Kid. The Yellow Kid, racially charged, but nonetheless was a one of our first comic strips. And then more or less ostentatious sympathy with the underdog, okay? Especially campaigns against abuses suffered by common people. We'll see this is so key when we talk about, again, we're going to talk about more muckraking and the progressive period as we get into Teddy Roosevelt's presidency especially. But that's really important, is to expose the underdog and expose you know, what was going on. And we did that with what was happening to the Cubans, you know, being the way they were being treated. Okay, here's another example of a cartoon, and this is in the style of the Yellow Kid, but it shows Hearst and Pulitzer kind of battling each other for this war and to put the war together in a way that the American public will buy it. Because not everybody was wanting to go to war. I mean, you'll definitely have your what we call war hawks, and this guy's one of them right here, and this is Teddy Roosevelt. You know, he will be a Rough Rider during this war. He'll make his name as a war hero. That will definitely help him once he becomes president at the turn of the century in 1901. But not everybody wanted this war. And we'll talk about that anti-imperialist in a little bit, especially as we look at White Man's Burden poem. Okay, so there's an explosion and it sinks the USS Maine. And this happens in February of 1898. 250, I should say, Americans die. And it's blamed on Spain. Okay, it's their fault. And we have these chants, to hell with Spain, remember the Maine, these brutes, these Spanish brutes right here, looking very brutish, all right, murdered our people, and we need to do something about it. So, well, history has uncovered that maybe it really wasn't the Spanish. Okay, so a few months after the Maine is sunk, 3 months actually, the United States declares war, and McKinley, when he asks for a declaration of war, it comes with kind of a deal of how we will end up leaving Cuba alone, and it's called the Tellier Amendment, and we'll talk more about that. But Cuba's going to be a different story than the Philippines. But this war is going to have two theaters, you guys. It's got the Cuban arena, 90 miles off our coast, where we will actually essentially cut off any shipments of supplies from the Spanish into to the Cubans, or to the Spanish in Cuba, and that's one of the ways that we are successful. And then we have the Philippine arena, because again, the Philippines is controlled by Spain, and so we will go to war in the Pacific, in the Philippines, against Spain. Now, I mentioned the blockade that will take place in Cuba, but really the success in the Philippines has to go, it goes to Commodore Dewey, honestly. In Manila Bay, he is able to smash the Spanish fleet, and the United States is successful there. So, when we look at the consequence of this war, the death toll is high, not because of combat, but because of disease. And you can see this can of meat here, nasty. But this can of meat, the canned meats that they were serving to our soldiers were killing them left and right. And it's, just it's disgusting. They were serving them rotted meat with disease-ridden meat that caused extreme dysentery. In fact, dysentery was one of the major causes of death. The war only lasted 3 months, and because of this war, we gained an empire. We get, the Philippines, Guam, Puerto Rico, Cuba. So it's pretty amazing. And the consequence of this war, you see here, John Hay says, "Oh, that was a splendid little war. It was a cute little war." I do have to say that our nation comes together. This is the first real conflict. It is the first conflict after the Civil War, and at one point, one politician said, "Well, damn those Yankees." Oh, I mean, damn those Spaniards. And it kind of shows like we've moved beyond the division we had in our country, and we are working together collaboratively, North and South, as one nation. And that is significant. And that's something to make note of. Now, the Treaty of Paris in 1898, there's John Hay right there. We see this Treaty of Paris, it ends the war. Cuba gains independence from Spain. And the U.S. gives $20 million to Spain for the purchase of the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Guam. Okay? Now, the aftermath in Cuba, the Tellier Amendment that I just talked about, 1898, the U.S. guarantees that it would not annex Cuba. Okay? And the Platt Amendment of 1903 allows the U.S. to intervene in Cuba, all right, rejected many, many times by the Cuban Assembly. And the U.S. actually refuses to withdraw troops. Okay? Now, the Platt Amendment, there is, of course, little or no independence left Cuba under the Platt Amendment, was what it said to Teddy Roosevelt, because we are able to assert power, and we will also be able to establish a military base, Guantanamo Bay. So there will be a Filipino rebellion from 1899 to 1902, and this is where we're going to stop and read The White Man's Burden, because it was written in regards to the U.S. policy to the Philippines. They do not want to be controlled by the Spanish. They want to have their independence. They actually will not get their independence till 1946. Okay, so we're going to stop here, and we are going to read The White Man's Burden poem. and look at it a little bit. Many versions on this from various different perspectives. All right, so let's go ahead and stop this and take a look at that now.